Digital Cybersecurity KPMG. I would please request our esteemed panel to join me on the stage. Mr. Mr. Chandraprakash, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah. So first of all, thank you everyone for your valuable time. Welcome to this very interesting panel discussion on Built in India, Destination for Security, Innovation and Engineering. I'm really glad to host this session as we have very experienced panel member from 3 premier cybersecurity OEMs, and I also personally admire them. As far as digital pace of acceleration is concerned, we all know that COVID has really accelerated it, and businesses of size have really gone into accelerated way to digitalize their businesses, infrastructure, and applications. And working from anywhere is here to stay. What it has done is that it has resulted in huge surge in demand for cybersecurity products and services, as it has become integral part of any digitization and modernization of applications and infrastructure journey. While this presents a unique and a very large opportunity for both domestic and multinational players to consider India as a destination for cyber innovation, due to many advantages it has, ranging from broad talent base, favorable demography, good digital infrastructure, a very large domestic market, and a very large engineering talent pool. However, it comes with its own set of challenges in terms of ease of doing business, intellectual property protection, high attrition, and fight for similar pool of talent across various lines of businesses. In today's discussion, we will get insights into the journey of security innovation and engineering and what more we can do to make it a grand success for India. With that context, let me start our discussion. And first, I would like to go with Dave. I know Dave personally when Qualys was 3 people when he joined. I think he's the 3rd employee. And I have seen the journey to over 1,000 people in last 10 years. So Dave, over to you. Qualys has one of the largest base for engineering and product development in India and has been investing here since long time. What has been your personal experience in strength and improvement areas that one should look for when setting up the innovation labs, doing investment, and specifically scaling them?
I can't.
Deb, I'm not able to hear you.
Yeah.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Much better.
Yeah, so I'm saying, this is an easy sounding question that you ask CP, but it's a very difficult answer because not everybody takes the same road to success, right? But I'll tell you, we forayed into India in 2011 officially. To give you a breadth of our investment, our investment plan was always much more than just hunting for talent here. We did not really want to come here to just invest in talent. We had a large regional DC and DR set up here for our customers already, right? Because we had many customers who wanted a boost in their confidence to invest in our technology. And that was only possible by making an investment in a data center locally. So we did that many years earlier. And so in terms of investment in India, we are, of course, like you said, 1,000 plus. We are 1,126 employees today, and we still have 200 plus job requisitions open on our portal. So we have a tremendous talent pool that we are hunting for. We have 2 data centers hosting 500 plus domestic customers in India alone, right? In fact, in the year 2019, when our late CEO was to meet some officials in Ministry of IT, we were asked for some numbers around our investment in India, and it was in excess of 700 crores back in 2019. So that number probably has grown significantly, and today it must be a very different number, and we're extremely proud of that investment. To bring in perspective to respond to your question, if you remember Jack Welch, the first CEO of General Electric, he once said when he came to India that they came to India for cost and discovered talent. But for Qualys, it was it was the opposite. We came here for the bright talent, and we are also very glad to see the cost. So our investment in terms of our leadership involvement is also very high. Our chief of products and the CEO are in the India R&D side once every 6 to 8 weeks, right? So even in our quarterly earnings call, we proudly flaunt our investment in India. And many of our VP of product management across our product portfolio and the top engineering heads are in India, and they all global teams. right? But many companies, of course, start with having smaller percentage of folks in India, but ours is just the opposite. The talent here is ready for much more than low-level work. Also, I may not have answered the question directly around the improvement areas, but one thing I would say for sure is if you are still, not serious with your India investment, then you have a really, really long way to go. And this is industry V4. So do not look at India for low-level work. Empower everyone because the talent is there. And Qualys is a big example to demonstrate that value.
Great to know. So my next question is to you, Jilmil. Are you seeing this entire shift in consumer demand for security products? Earlier, everybody was talking about the typical perimeter security level products. But with this COVID and rapid digitization, it looks like there are 3 or 4 things which are more important than ever. One of them is identity anywhere. Second, people are talking about data security, which is data anywhere. And third, about the endpoint protection. So how are you seeing this increasing demand in these solutions of identity anywhere, data security, and endpoint security solutions?
Right. So that's a great question. And so as we all know, there's been forced and accelerated digitization due to the pandemic. And work from remote has put many enterprises into a panic state. More than 85% CISOs see this as a major change driver and have far, far better improved sentiments towards cybersecurity now. The need to keep their employees safe needed a rapid transition to remote operations. This has vastly increased the attack surface, and organizations of all sizes need to now harden their defenses, since APTs are difficult to track and mitigate. So, we as enterprises need a cybersecurity experience that not only gives us a security, but is seamless and also takes into account the core product development processes. And, the processes may even require a re-engineering effort. So, what organizations are typically looking for are risk assessment at a granular level, prioritization and management via automation, because that's the foundation of working from anywhere. Along with it, identity and remote access management, and a robust endpoint security solution. We're also seeing an increased demand for cloud security, since cloud-based services is the go-forward solution and approach for data. And we know that some of the critical infrastructures like energy grids, hospitals, logistics, and transportation have become soft targets to disrupt operations. So, security of the operations environment, factories, manufacturing is also high much in growth because they are no longer air gap, and a ransomware impact can easily seize operations like we saw in the recent Colonial Pipelines case. So along with data security, identity anywhere, endpoint protection, there is also cloud security and OT security, which are really growing at this point in time.
Sure. And you made an important point because banking, financial services, insurance, and to some extent energy sectors, these were largely the target for attackers, and 80-85% of the attacks used to come there. But you rightly said, now we see everybody from consumer market to pharmaceutical companies becoming and hospital chains becoming an easy target. With this new set of innovations that are happening in cyber products, because everybody is talking about analytics, machine learning, artificial intelligence, we see that in all of these spaces, be it identity, data, or endpoint, there are plethora of products which are coming up in the market. So Nilesh, a question to you that how do you see this market shaping up? And how do we discover the secret sauce for success for both consumers, OEMs, and investors? As a consumer, sometimes I get confused. Which product is right? How many, say, security monitoring products? What kind of algorithms they use? How accurate they are? What is the efficiency and effectiveness of them? Can it replace traditional product or live with both of it? So what's the secret sauce? And how do we see, when selecting a right product, how do we really evaluate which ML is really better than, say, other?
Yeah, that's really an interesting problem that we have in hands, right? And and let's face it, right? I mean, analytics is the key, right? I mean, because wherever we are seeing across the board right now, right? I mean, like Jilmil pointed out, right, in terms of be it cloud analytics or or IoT or what have you, there is a lot of data that's getting generated, right? And the way, I mean, I wouldn't say that there is like one secret sauce as such, right? The key is one thing when it comes to analytics is to have contextual analytics, right, across the various different data telemetry, right? And that's the key, right? I give a classic example wherein if you see someone running hastily in at an airport, for instance, right? I mean, it's not like he probably might be just missing his or her flight, and that's why that person is running, or maybe he has a weapon or something and he's running from law enforcement agencies or what have you, right? So it's very difficult to make that determination, right? It doesn't really matter at that point, what analytical technique you leverage, right? Because there could be multiple analytical, algorithms or models or what have you. The key is to make sure that you're analyzing the right data points, right? In terms of whether that person is carrying a briefcase or what have you, or he's probably dressed in business casual or things of that nature, right? And that is exactly what makes much better determination, right? In terms of what kind of analytics would be applied as well. So that context is the key, right? Context across various data telemetry across the board, right? Like you pointed out, I mean, there are plethora of products, right? Cybersecurity products, and the key is to get data from all of these different products and sort of harness that from an analytics standpoint, right? And few other things that are going to be critical in order to get to the sort of the risk scoring that Jilmil was talking about as well, right? Which would then produce something actionable for various consumers, is also to ensure that all of this analytics is run, and there is no black box as such, right? I mean, whatever analytics you're running, I mean, the idea is to have sort of an open analytics framework or a platform that will give the consumers the capability to tweak some of those the underlying analytics or machine learning models or what have you, right? Because cybersecurity, I think one of the interesting aspects of cybersecurity is that it spans across all industry verticals, right? I mean, we just started talking about the fact that if you look at some of the IoT or critical infrastructure, those could be impacted, apart from sort of the traditional cybersecurity concerns that we have around financial data and intellectual property or what have you, right? And it spans across all of these various different industries. So it's interesting, right? In order for analytics to sort of be that silver bullet, or to your going back to your question in terms of how do we discover that secret sauce? The key is to make sure that you have the right context, the right data telemetry. It's not a black box, right? You're able to tweak the analytics as per your use cases or what have you, because all of this is what is going to lead to sort of better interoperability and sort of risk driven automated actions. That's what I
Sure,
do.
got it. Yeah, so clear definition of use case and identifying the data that matters, and then based on what is the outcome that you required from that analytics is the key to make it successful. So let me enhance this question and go to you, Jilmil. While we are seeing a lot of use cases for cyber-based products, either in the area of deception or in SOAR technology or next generation cyber analytics for monitoring, where do you see more opportunities to invest? And can you provide some examples of a few specific and interesting use cases that will go into security innovations going forward?
Yeah, sure. So one of the areas that I am looking into, and that ties in also with what Nilesh just said, is the Internet of Things. So more specifically into the operational technology aspect of it. So whether you talk of manufacturing, health technology, logistics, banking and finance, like we said earlier, and even education and utilities. But everybody is firstly adopting these smart tech devices. So the need for data integrity and protecting against ransomware is increasingly becoming vital for, efficient functioning. Now we all know what an OT is, but it's a very interesting area to explore because traditionally these have been air gapped, designed keeping operational efficiency in mind and with zero security design principles. But the fact that there is a need to remote manage, there is a need to provide visibility and better operational efficiencies have required to open up internet access to these systems. So the use cases there become especially challenging because if you look at the Purdue model L2, L3 systems, like the SCADA servers and the human machine interfaces, they are built still running on legacy systems like Windows XP. And no upgrade path going to the future because the cost of upgrading is humongous. And with certification overheads, like you can talk about FDA in healthcare and other relevant certifications in the OT industry. So what happens, and plus there is an aversion to adding security. A lot of these OT components like the PLCs and RTOs use real-time OS. So what do? You can't do traditional EDR because you do not have an agent on these systems. So the critical use cases here are the ability to get accurate visibility of the inventory. You don't have an agent. How do you do it? Then managing vulnerabilities. You cannot patch the system. So how do you do it? The ability to detect anomalies, and there, it comes about the data collection. How much data and logs and information you collect so you can actually identify anomalies from there. Can you see if a vulnerability is getting exploited? Protecting against threats from the adversaries, because there can be serious downtime and huge dollar impact. And this industry is so fragmented, it's a very, very difficult landscape to enter. It requires establishing and nurturing partnerships within industry consortiums and standards bodies. So this is, one of the very, very interesting use cases and this is like the IT industry of the 90s. That's where it is at this point in time. So hopefully maybe we'll see some minor changes in the next 20 years or so.
Sure, yeah, and this really points out to the increasing demand for OT-based SOC, which are non-intrusive. They do not collect logs by agents, but they sit on the switchboard, span it, and take a packet, and then do analytics on top of it. So there's a great and interesting use case, but the challenges also are many. Like you said, some of the protocols are legacy, some may not be even TCP/IP, or some can be dependent on the individual OEMs. So how do you really do analytics on top of it and partner with those industries is a really key challenge. So let me expand this question and take it to Dev. You have been in this industry for like a decade. You said that you established in 2011. And cyber is also a place where it needs continuous innovation. We have to move from one value chain to another. Now it needs product enhancements, automation, use of analytics, or use of machine learning. How do really OEMs keep pace that need consistent investment? And are there better ways that you see, either to say collaborate with academia for certain researches on machine learning algorithms or cryptography? Or do you see some place where similar boutique firms which are doing research can come with the larger firms? Or there is any other way by which you can create an ecosystem in India?
That is a brilliant question, CP. So before I run back to my answer, and I think Jilmil, you scared me when you said we are back in 90s because I don't want to go through the Y2K bug again. No Y2K bug again. No .NET, no .com bust again. So to answer your question, CP, this is a very natural thing actually, right? Moving up the value chain is kind of core to seeing progress in the eyes of both insiders like your employees, your customers, or your research partners, right? Or even your outsiders like your investors, right? One thing we know for sure today is, being number one for Qualys was hard, but staying number one is even harder, right? Uneasy lies the head that wears the crown, and we are seeing that challenge now. We have been number one in the industry for many, many years. And that is only attributed to the fact that we build a really good product based on great feedback from clients, right? You cannot do it all by yourself. Only because I had good clients, I could do it. Now, I personally believe that continuous innovation is a circular queue. Now, circular queue as in strictly the circular queue in a data structure, if you understand data structures, right? So good products are always a work of innovation. There is no second way. And a constant growth in our ability to research is directly proportional to developing the right product. A good product is an outcome of having good talent. You can hire good talent only if you have the right customers pushing you to do the right thing. And you have the right customer only when they make the right investment in your technology. So it's a cyclic dependency, right? Now, a good product is directly proportional to what you pump into its research. And it is absolutely true for a security product. You are as good as the amount of research you do, right? A very strong research team is critical to its security product capabilities. And this is a very big investment, needs all the right elements into it, including executive sponsorship and direct involvement in many, many ways. Now, coming to the part where you wanted us to look at, an ecosystem or a mechanism to do all that with academia, good research, of course, happens in many ways, right? Academia is definitely a big part of it. Like you can't make a good product design all by yourself and then push it on your customers. The same way, you cannot do all good research yourself. It cannot happen. We have so many good people, but not all the good people, right? So, the key to that is our involvement with academia, boutique research firms in India is there, but it can, of course, become a lot better. We have to work around a little bit with the kind of service agreements that we have with our customers, where we promise them that nothing goes outside of Qualys. We do not show anything which is an intellectual property or customer data to anybody who is not a full-time employee of Qualys. So we can work around that a bit and accommodate it beyond what we already do. But to answer to the question directly, academia, working with other research teams, working with third-party threat research teams, working with innovators in industries that might be doing a siloed thing but doing it the best possible way, is the Qualys way of doing it. You cannot do it unless you are collaborating with others. We have collaboration in place, not just with engineering teams, but also with sharp-minded people in big fours. And that we have a bright working relationship with KPMG included, right? It's not really about just being a seller, right? It's all about identifying, are we doing the right thing that the customer really needs, right? You don't want to discover it at the end of the day that you did something that nobody wants, right? So you're bang on. Academia is a part of it. The ecosystem is a big part of it, and we are doing that.
Great. I will come back to you, Dev, with a follow-up question on that. But let me move to Nilesh, because last time Nilesh mentioned specific things about algorithms and use cases. I really get confused, when I see machine learning, and be it a product on cyber monitoring as an SIEM, or a user entity behavior analytics, or even EDR, or even now, the firewalls and intrusion prevention systems. Everybody is claiming to have some sort of threat intel and some sort of analytics, and give us various kinds of reports on either the threat that can materialize, or the contextual information, or the anomaly detection capabilities. When I see how do I compare and how much of that is enough, it becomes really challenging. Should I take all the products with the same thing, or I just need a SIEM solution which will continue to coexist, say, for example, with a cyber analytics platform, which can give me telemetry for both endpoints and network. And I can leverage that for threat hunting, because I can query the anomalies or packets or whatever I want to do much easier way. How do I really go about it? I don't want, say, capability to, as a SOAR, to do incident response, simultaneously an EDR to do incident response, or block URLs. And so it's really confusing when I see too many products coming up the same way. So what will be your suggestion? Like, how do I take out this confusion, and how do we know the accuracy, sufficiency of right products, and maybe some common denominator where I can compare the products and what's right for me?
Yeah. No, that's a really interesting question. So analytics in cybersecurity, I think we are. I know earlier backstage we were talking about the whole COVID wave, and that's what I see in cybersecurity as well, right? I mean, there are waves of either technologies or sort of buzzwords or what have you, right? Back in the day, a few years back, there was a big explosion of cloud and cloud-based technologies. Prior to that, it was around big data, for instance. And similarly, now we are in this whole analytics realm, right, where, like you pointed out, that every product out there has some sort of analytics, right? So it's the term itself for analytics has overloaded, right? Over the years. In terms of and it definitely gets quite confusing as well. With every product claiming that that they have all of these different algorithms or what have you. But the key here again, right, in order for analytics to solve any particular problem, right, it needs to make sure that obviously it maps to the use case that you're trying to solve. For instance, every organization, they need to know what is it that they are trying to leverage that particular product for, right? I mean, is it around monitoring, let's say, their IoT devices versus, their users, or is it more around insider threat or what have you? Because for each of those, the analytical techniques are going to change, right? And your product selection kind of depends on, depends on that, right? The other thing there is also that in terms of when I look at analytical metrics, and you asked about the question in terms of how do you measure the accuracy or sufficiency of each of these analytical products or what have you. So there are lots of model metrics. This goes back to my earlier point as well, that if it is black box, it's challenging. But in the analytics realm, there are a lot of different model metrics that you can collect in terms of each of those analytical models that get run, right? And when I look at model metrics, it's not just about false positive or false negative. It's more than that, right? It's about understanding the sensitivity, or the recall score, or the F1 score, and things of that nature. And a lot of that, are sort of data science terms, but in number of cases, especially with our technology as well, with Gurukul's technology, we have tried to sort of simplify some of that in more in terms of cybersecurity terms as well, right? So that's crucial. The other thing is that in terms of sufficiency and sort of the coverage. So obviously, there is no sort of one model that fits all, right? So we at Gurukul, what we have done is that we have built a library of all of these different machine learning models. We have close to 2,000 plus models which are mapped to different use cases, threat frameworks, industry verticals, solutions. So various different categorization, and that makes it easier for consumers to understand that how and what kind of analytics is something that needs to be deployed in their environment, right? The other key aspect here is that also customers need to understand that analytics is not the answer for everything. For instance, right? I know. Again, going back to what I was talking earlier, that analytics is overloaded right now. And people think that no, we only need machine learning, and rules is like a thing of the past, or pattern analysis is a thing of the past. No, not really, right? Though analytics is the key, but it's not like be all and end all of everything, right? It's not like analytics is going to solve the problem for all situations, right? A classic example would be that if you're looking at an IoT device, for instance, even a refrigerator now, you have those smart refrigerators or what have you. If your refrigerator has gone down, or if it is out of power, you really don't need some heavy duty deep learning model to analyze that, right? It could just be done by a standard pattern based recognition or what have you, right? So that's another aspect that consumers also need to understand, that when I'm looking at sort of the breadth and the and sort of the sufficiency of all the various different products or analytical techniques that I have, it encompasses all of that, taken into consideration, right? So these are a few aspects, which would ensure that customers have sort of the right products and map to various different threat vectors or use cases. And then industry is also now adopting a lot in terms of standardization across the frameworks, right? In the last couple of years, probably you must have seen that the whole MITRE ATT&CK framework, it became sort of a gold standard, right? For a lot of those threat vectors as well as use cases, scenarios, or what have you. We at Gurukul continuously contribute towards that ATT&CK framework as well, right? So. And similarly, there are a lot of other, threat frameworks and compliance frameworks. So, what Deb was talking about as well earlier, right? That there is a lot of collaboration, that we are seeing now in the industry across, customers as well as cybersecurity companies as well, which will ensure that everyone has good enough coverage and they know exactly what are the kind of products, what are the use cases that need to be targeted as well, right? And that's a very positive and an encouraging sign.
Yeah, Nilesh, I think you reinstated my belief that these are not the replacements. These are complementary, and it can work with the say old traditional VM plus analytics, help you in prioritization plus intelligence. That gives you a little bit of way ahead, etc. Yeah, sounds good. So Nilesh, I would again jump onto you. Let me go to the reverse round robin way now. I saw. When I was growing up, I think in 2002, 2003 types, there was an article which says "Quit India Movement," which was telling that how 60-70% of the people in IITs really are going to Oracles and Microsofts of the world, to the Silicon Valley. And there was entire discussion on brain drain. And in fact, some people were saying that why should we invest in IITs from the budget, which is for people, and they are not contributing to the country's growth. What it has been now that people, while being the core of the innovation, on one side, we are saying that we have a large talent pool, which is there. But we also see in India that since last 25 years, the way we have grown is that the talent is geared towards services and delivery mindset. And most of the people who used to be relatively innovative used to go to the US and UK and some other countries where the ecosystem probably and the career growth and satisfaction was much more. Now, what can we do to create this talent, which is geared towards product development, engineering, research, and provide them a long-term career growth? How you really can attract the talent, give them some global exposure, let them grow, and retain for a longer term to make this India story successful?
Yeah. So that's a that's a really interesting I would say viewpoint that I have in that, right? I mean, with Gurukul, I have a huge engineering and product team. I wouldn't even call it engineering. It's a product team, and we have built out out there in India, right? And this was almost 10-12 years back. I agree with you, right? But what was sort of the norm, or probably 15 or 20 years back, things have changed, right? And there are quite a few factors for that. Number one is that overall the industry has changed, right? Right from being the service-based industry, and also kudos to sort of the big three of Indian consulting firms or what have you, right? They nurtured a lot of that talent as well, right? However, we are moving more towards an era where everything is cloud driven, right? As much as there is a lot of sort of the service based mindset or what have you, but the way I look at it, it's a lot more sort of strategic rather than just operational kind of services industry or what have you, right? Because you're looking at number of, back in the day, I mean, it used to take 10 years to deploy, let's say, a big solution like an Oracle ERP or what have you, right? Now, people move towards Salesforce or things of that nature, where within sort of a click of a button or what have you, you are up and running, right? So there has been a shift in that, and what that has done is that it has also helped the talent in India to move towards more sort of that mindset in terms of what a product is, what product innovation is, and things of that nature. Part of that is also depending upon sort of the exposure, right? I mean, you asked about how do you retain talent, or what is it needed to sort of change that talent and the core of innovation as well. What I have noticed and experienced personally is also exposure of people to sort of newer technology, is right. One other, I think, distinction that I have seen between a services or a product-based companies is that with product, and that's something that you'll have to nurture within your team or what have you, right? Where you're able to see sort of the completion or the culmination of years of work or hard work, right? Unlike in services where you're moving from a project to project basis, right? I mean, there is definitely a lot of satisfaction there as well, but when it comes to a product, it's just at a different level, right? The other thing is also providing people the opportunity to dabble in multiple things, right? Everyone, the grass is always greener on the other side, right? But if you're able to provide all of those different opportunities, like within my team itself, I mean, there are people who switch from, let's say, being a QA to a developer to on product side of things, be it a product owner or product manager or or any of those roles as well, right? So if you give them sort of those opportunities, then that definitely helps in that realm as well, right? Also partnering, right? I mean, that is something that I have learned over the years as well, right? Where we partner with a lot of different educational systems and what have you, and really sort of nurture that right at sort of the school level itself. For instance, right? I mean, we have a great internship program, right? Where wherein a lot of these students come in and they intern with us. Not everyone has to join us, but they do learn more about what product development means, and what innovation is, or what have you. There are lots of sort of innovative things that that happen within within our teams as well, right? Be it something like a hackathon or what have you. So it just gives them a lot more exposure, to the industry, as well as to multiple industries across the spectrum as well, right? So the whole idea is to make sure that it is interesting for the talent, and who are planning to sort of join us or what have you. And then doing it at sort of the lowest levels to the highest levels, right? I mean, there are a number of other countries out there where there is a lot of government support as well, right? To their startup companies, and probably we all have seen that as well, right? Wherein it's government funded or what have you. So some of those initiatives as well, like the whole Make in India movement that's going on, I think that is going to help as well. So a lot of these aspects have changed over the last decade or so, which I think is interesting, and that is what's going has changed the mindset in India. And I truly believe that that people are in India are moving towards a lot more sort of product development and engineering, and not just a services mindset. Right?
Sure. While I have a couple of more questions, I would request the audience, if they have questions, please put up in the chat box so that I can take up the audience questions also. So thanks, Nilesh, for that. And I will move to Jilmil. Jilmil, I would like to actually ask you the same question, because there's a quite pertinent problem in India, an ecosystem of high attrition, lack of product engineering talent, and a lot of competing firms really fighting for the same talent. How do you believe firms who are interested in product development and engineering innovation can address it?
Yeah. Yeah, hiring and retention in the high tech sector in India has, I think, probably always been a challenge. And while I do, agree with what a lot of things that Nilesh said, but I still think it continues to be a challenge even today, because India job market is quite unique, and maybe you can compare it with a market like Romania. And brain drain still happens. We still have a lot of talent moving towards the West. And then it becomes a demand and supply problem, right? Companies like us, we are creating the, demand, but the supply is still not there, to match the demand. And therefore the supply can, charge as much as they really want. And we all want to do core R&D and product development. So I think some of the few things that we have tried to do, in here in CrowdStrike, or even in my earlier avatars, and what I think sincerely believe every startup should be doing is, firstly, your brand name is important, because it's, for us, it's the social status for the candidates, and it takes time and effort to build that. So whether you talk about the interview process, candidate experience, they go a long way towards building that. But then the most critical aspect, like Nilesh also mentioned, is the work profile. What is the work the person is going to be doing? What is the impact that's being created? And how is it helping in the company growth? And how are you able to convince the individual that the work in India is equally exciting and challenging as any other part of the world? And once if you have hired the candidate, the integrity you show towards what you have committed before. So constant communication and creating a great environment to work, innovate and empowering people are the key factors towards retention. Using references from your current employees is always a great idea. Also, also want to just touch upon how the offer is structured is a very important aspect. You need to find out what really works for the person and tune the offer accordingly. And trust me, it doesn't have to be the highest offer. We need to be flexible, open, and honest, not make any false communication. At CrowdStrike, other than these, we also provide a lot of opportunity for growth and success to every employee. Nilesh mentioned moving into different teams. How do you grow, as an individual contributor, as a manager, as a product manager, recognition for every milestone. Hiring and providing internships also, to the bright young minds also helps in reversing the brain drain to a certain extent. Additionally, CrowdStrike also works with various colleges and universities for cybersecurity initiatives, and the CrowdStrike Foundation provides scholarships and support for fundamental research in related areas.
Sure, sure. This is, kind of bit confusing to me. I will tell you why. That on one side, we are saying that we need to continuously innovate every 2-3 year cycles, like change. You call it waves. We need to be more and more productive and enhanced with enhancement of the products. On the second side, we are also saying that probably we are fighting for talent, and we probably have to leverage, nurture them. And then we were also talking about investments. Now, all these things will some way derail, the firms in continuous innovation. So how can Indian companies can compete globally, because there are so many firms that are coming up worldwide with similar kind of products? And I still take an EDR as an example. I think there are 25 companies that I know that are in this space, and at least 10 of them are in India. And same is true for SIEM and cyber analytics and vulnerability management and so on and so forth. And a lot of firms are global and they have deep pockets too, because the kind of investment that are happening in some of the cyber products is mind-boggling. So how did Indian companies can compete globally? What are a couple of risks that we see that can actually derail the advantage that currently India has? Is it like talent availability, partnership with GCC, whatever? So maybe this last question is for Dev, and I told you that I will come back to you with the same question that you answered, as an extension to it.
Yeah, I this is my favorite topic. If you want to talk about how India is the place to be for all kinds of security innovation, I can probably talk for 7 days and still be left with more content. Before I jump onto to answering that question, CP, I'll give a small extension to what Nilesh and Jelbil brought up, which is a very key area. Let's not fight for the talent, because we really cannot fight, in the non-organic fashion. And to come back to Nilesh in around, I think we don't have to bother about, the outflux of talent from this country. We have to give them the reason to be here, right? You can give them the same reason. I'm not saying incentives are the only way. Freedom to do what they want, freedom to experiment, making regulatory less painful for them to try out new technologies. Look at how fintech has evolved, and regulations can't even catch up with the kind of innovation that they're doing, right? Forget compliance mandates. So now, answering to your question, CP, around innovation, how companies can globally compete by innovation. It is a very old saying. I think everybody knows this. Like, a tree is known by the fruit it bears, right? So a company is exactly going to be measured by how much innovation they can harness, not from the talent that they go and get externally, but for the talent that they have internally. Moving between departments is an old school thing, right? Identify the right person for the right job. Sometimes you get people who do not really know what they're great at. They want to just start with something, right? What programs do you run internally to identify that? Do you have objective methods to look at what are the things I'm doing to identify the right person for a right job, right? We don't do that enough, internally. Every time we need something, we probably hunt outside first, then look internally, right? That needs to change, right? Now, of course, in a shortcut, I can always say India sits on the top of every innovative company, right? We have Indians everywhere. In short, if you want to be innovative, you must probably start by hiring Indians first, right? Now, the problem is, today, sustained mediocrity, is becoming the new excellence. That cannot happen. We need to change that. We need to aim for the stars and make sure that we are landing in the star, not falling short and landing in the moon, because that's not helping. We need to move beyond the survival mindset and go to the growth mindset, right? And this this is high level. If I have to make points around how to do that, it is a book that will probably take forever to read, right? Now, today we are producing disruptive technologies and trends in cybersecurity, IoT, robotics, virtual reality, AI, and these are fundamentally changing the way we live and work, right? So we need to demonstrate even patterns of growth. Uneven patterns of growth is not really making people our buyers happy. It has to be even patterns of growth. Be more comprehensive in our approach. Make stable progress, right? Building a brand that is known for perfection. This is what Nilesh brought up, right? You should be known for the brand, right? So I think Jilbil also brought this up.
Jilbil brought up, yeah.
Right, yeah. Now because you and me all know there is still a difference between a watch and a Swiss watch, right? So be known for perfection, right? For cybersecurity startups, it is important to work on many challenges that hinders their growth. they need to think and plan becoming global. It is expensive becoming global. It is not easy. It can be, difficult to grow beyond a regional market. And there are many ways to do it. Let's say, for example, if your offering does something in the silos, then work with a global company, because they already have established customers who have the same pain, and you can piggyback on their products and deliver the same value, right? Build integrations, if required, get acquired. Getting acquired is not the end of things, right? If you look at Qualys acquisitions, we have made 6 acquisitions. 5 of them are in the last 2 years and the last 3 years, and 5 of them are Indian companies, right? They have been doing great, and working in the silos was hindering their growth, right? We have taken them global to 25,000 customers globally, right? Or if that doesn't work, piggyback on a global distributor, right? But find out ways to grow, because sometimes growth, is actually within, and we are wasting our time looking outside. So this is a simple message, and I think India can compete. India is competing globally, only on grounds of innovation. We are no longer competing on grounds of having cheap labor. We are competing with our capabilities, with the innovation that we bring on the table.
Sure. I think some times you use philosophical words too there, but thank you for that. We are just 2 minutes away. So what I will do is that somebody has made a comment, Chogle. So let me take that comment and maybe, some reaction, and then we can close. While we have many corporates working together on the tech side, like building on common framework, we all said that, we are contributing to MITRE ATT&CK framework or intelligence sharing, etc. He's writing that we also need corporates to work together to keep the salary perks to a set and maintain a high benchmark. I'm not sure if there can be some, working around on standardization of maybe designations and salaries and perks across. I'm not sure if that can happen, but he writes that, that would alleviate the talent iteration to some extent. Anybody want to take up that? Because I am little, confused whether it's practically viable to do it, because it all depends on the firm and the need, at that time, and its own benchmark, compensation philosophy, etc. Yeah, anyone?
I'll give a very short thing, guys. So I am involved, in the interview panel of, almost every department we hire, be it engineering, be it field, be it leadership roles in support or engineering and product. Right? I'll tell you one thing. Qualys meant, so basically we really pay well. We know we pay well, right? And we have had candidates who tell me during interview, I have got offers from these 3 companies and here are my numbers. But to be honest, we have never floated them an offer saying, okay, we'll pay you better. Because I know this is not an organic way to have people continue working in a company like Qualys. Qualys is all about bring in the best in you, and we compensate you adequately, or probably more than adequate. But fighting that way is impossible. And like you agree, CP, it is impractical to enforce, right? It is really impractical to enforce.
Sure, we are completely right.
I don't.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, last word. Yeah.
No, just last word, right? I mean, and I don't even think that's that's going to help, because I think that if we go into that kind of standardization, I mean, it's not going to foster innovation, right? And it's going to bring in complacency, because that okay, if you are at certain bracket, no matter where you go, this is what you're going to get, right? So it's going to be counterproductive at that point.
Sure. Yeah, I enjoyed this discussion very much. Thank you, everyone, really, for pulling out time, and thank you, the audience. Over to you, Vikas.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone in our panel. And thank you to our wonderful audience. Thank you, Mr. Chandraprakash, for your moderation. And I would like to announce to the audience that we have a session that's just started in the main auditorium. So please head on to the main auditorium for the Board of the Security Unicorn session.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.